This is Radio TV Phono Nut, and this is something that I normally wouldn't have messed with because it's in kind of poor cosmetic shape. Well, the cabinet needs to be glued back together, but it's not like these are growing on trees, and so I went ahead and got it. This had been up on eBay for the longest time, and it was grossly overpriced. Well, after a year or two, the price finally came down to something I could kind of live with, so I shot the guy an offer and he accepted it, so here it is. And what this is an old talking book machine for the blind, probably late 40s or early 50s. We'll try to look for some date codes on it. It plays 33 1/3 RPM only. That was the talking book speed at that time. That was before they switched to 16 RPM and then later down to 8 RPM. Now this is our off-on volume control, and obviously the knob is missing, but I think this is a rather generic knob. We should be able to come up with one. This is our pilot light, this is our motor off-on switch, and our tone control. Someone has replaced the cartridge with what looks like an Astatic 89T. I think this had a crystal cartridge in it to start with. Plugged it in, and all it does is hum from bad filters, and the motor doesn't turn either. Well, this could be why the turntable platter is not on here right, so it might turn now. Here's the amplifier. It uses a mighty big transformer for what it is. Our tube lineup is 6SL7, 6K6, and 5Y3. And I can see that an orange drop capacitor has been installed at some point in time. This is the filter that's obviously bad. Yeah, it looks kind of sloppily made, but I think this was one of those machines that was made right after the war ended, and it was probably built with whatever parts they had on hand. Here's the schematic. And I can see the wrong tube is installed. This is supposed to have a 6F6 in it. It has a 6K6. No date on the schematic, just talking book reproducer, Library of Congress, Division for the Blind. And then it was made by U.S. Recording Company, Model T. No date on here anywhere. Alright, let's plug it up and just see what it does. Gotta make people cringe, you know, plug up something that's 70 years old with original capacitors in it. Well, it turns now. Well, putting the platter back on right helps. Well, the needle point's gone. Let's try another and find another needle. Alright, put a new cartridge in it. Let's see what happens.
Complete on 2 records. North American Game Birds by Arthur A. Allen. Complete on 2 records. Recorded solely for the use of the blind in the Talking Book Studios of American Foundation for the Blind, Incorporated. Bird songs recorded in the field by the Laboratory of Ornithology, Cornell University. North American Game Birds by Arthur A. Allen. Complete on 2 records. Recorded solely for the use of the blind in the Talking Book Studios of American Foundation for the Blind, Incorporated. Bird songs recorded in the field by the Laboratory of Ornithology, Cornell University. Read by Kermit Murdoch. First, you will hear the 12 birds included in...
Okay, for those of you who are unfreaked out and didn't move on to something else, we'll now solve the hum problem. Here's the speaker. 258, I believe, is the EIA code for whoever made it, and 106 is the date code, 6th week of 1951. So we can say this machine's from 1951. Okay, here we go. Our input filter soldered directly to the rectifier tube socket terminal, coming down here and soldered to the chassis, since in this case chassis is circuit ground. second filter connected here, going up here, and I put this terminal strip here under this chassis retaining bolt and put a little solder on it to keep it in place. Grounded there. This is our cathode bypass cap for the output tube. I just ran the wire up here, soldered the cap to this terminal strip, and we ought to be good to go. Now let's put it back in the case and see what happens.
By Arthur A. Allen, complete on 2 records, recorded solely for the use of the blind in the Talking Book Studios of American Foundation for the Blind, Incorporated. Bird songs recorded by the Laboratory of Ornithology, Cornell University. Read by Kermit Murdoch. First, you will hear the 12 birds included in North...
So this is an old talking book from probably the late 30s. These actually use a wide groove like a 78, and I have a 78 LP flipper cartridge in here, so I'll flip it over to the LP side, and you can hear how much noisier it is.
By the Laboratory of Ornithology, Cornell University. Read by Kermit Murdoch.
And then we'll get into mop and bleach and do whatever. We also saw flooding in the next port as everyone waited for water to come down.
Of a ruffed grouse.
The Mobile area has a heavy power outage, but all of those not in the power outage day. The county never instituted one of the beneficiaries of the bill that passed the special Mississippi legislative session. The next thing is
Okay, I'm going to bring a newer 33 RPM record down here and see how it does with that.
now for tonight's Health Watch.
Yeah, I can detect a little wow and flutter there, but I haven't done anything to the drive mechanism yet. Amplifier could stand a full overhaul to improve it, but replacing those filter capacitors got rid of the hum, obviously. Here's a talking book from '59 that just came to me today. I've been, over the past couple of years, a friend has been sending me these. He got them from a blind school library that was purging all of their old talking book records, and had he not taken them, they would have all gone to the dump, so he's been passing them along to me. And this record player has the guides at the back, so someone totally blind can place a 12-inch disc on the turntable, and we have our tone arm guide here. You just butt the arm up against the rubber thingy here and let it gently drop down, and there you go.
Thomas Jefferson, Champion of the People, by Clara Ingram Judson. Copyright 1952 by Clara Ingram Judson. Recorded in 5 records for the Library of Congress in the studios of the American Printing House for the Blind, 1959. Intended solely for the use of the blind, with the kind permission of the publishers, Wilcox and Follett Company. Read by Livingston Gilbert.
Okay, I sort of did a quickie, let's get it going and get it off the bench job, because I really don't have time to devote the amount of time it's going to take to properly restore this. I replaced the filter capacitors, as you saw, replaced a couple of out-of-tolerance resistors, with one being the resistor on the audio output tube cathode. It was a 470 ohm, and it was up to like 560 ohms. I replaced the capacitor on the tone control. Did a quick clean and lubrication of the drive mechanism without taking anything apart. But, you know, this is going to need a good bit of work for it to be perfect. And more of that work's going to be cosmetic, because the cabinet's coming apart. The studs that most of the screws attached to that hold the motor board and the speaker baffle in place are busted off, and those are going to have to be replaced. The audio output tube is supposed to be a 6F6. Somebody has a 6K6 plugged into the socket, which is a little baby output tube. It really needs the proper tube, and I may have a 6F6 here somewhere, but I'm not going to dig for it right now. This is not going to be something that I use on a regular basis. This is just something to add to the talking book machine collection, since I collect those. And I actually have a pretty good supply of them from the 30s on up. There's some I'm missing. Now, I found a date stamp under the platter on this one, July 1952. The one after this, I'm pretty sure, was the Model B from about 54, 53, 54. Now, it was a model that had the speaker grill on the front, and then the top flipped back. And when you put the record on, half the record stuck out while the other half was up inside the machine. And then the one after that was in a gray case, the Model C, which was similar to the same design. Then the Model D from about 57, it had the speaker in the lid, was in a gray case, and was the first 2-speed 16 and 33 model. And then there were ascendants of that in the AD series through the mid-60s, and then I believe in 65 the AE model series came along that was in a gray case with a speaker in the lid, but those had 8 RPM on them. And a lot of the older 2-speed machines were fitted with 3-speed motors to play the new 8 RPM records. And then there was one solid state wooden case machine in about 65, but they didn't make many of those. Solid state didn't really take off until about 68, when the first plastic cased machines came out. But this machine here, it works okay like it is. And here's a record from 55, I believe, something that would have possibly been played on this machine.
The Nigger of the Narcissus by Joseph Conrad. Copyright 1897-1914 by Doubleday, Page & Company. Copyright 1897 by Batchelor Syndicate. Recorded in 8 records for the Library of Congress and the studios of the American Printing House for the Blind, 1955. Intended solely for the use of the blind, with the kind permission of the publishers J.M. Dent & Sons, Limited. Read by Livingston Gilbert. Chapter 1. Mr. Baker, chief mate of the ship Narcissus, stepped in one stride out of his lighted cabin into the darkness of the quarterdeck. Above his head, on the break of the poop, the night watchman rang a double stroke. It was 9 o'clock. Mr. Baker, speaking up to the man above him.
Now keep in mind that a lot of these talking book records are not going to be in the best of shape after all these many years, because of number one, the equipment they were played on was often not in the best of shape. And they had heavy tracking tone arms that weren't the most gentle to records, and oftentimes the borrower of the record didn't take the best care of them, whether it was intentional or accidental. But it's hard to find talking book records that are in pristine shape, because they just, between rough handling and the equipment they were played on, they just really didn't stand a chance. Now, I suspect this machine was used up until probably the early 60s. I think 62 was the last year for the 12-inch 33 1/3 RPM talking books. I believe in sometime in 62 or 3 is whenever they switched to the 10-inch 16 RPM books. So I feel like by that time this machine was probably considered obsolete and replaced with a 2-speed model. And whoever had this one either didn't send it back in or was just told by the library that we don't want it back. You do what you want to with it. You know, back then they weren't so picky about stuff like that. Now it would be more like, oh no, that's government property. You can't have that. You have to send it back to us so we can destroy it. You know, we can't let you have it, but we'll destroy it where can't nobody get any use out of it.
As the beating canvas of a heavy foresail, or tossing aloft, invisible in the night, gave back yell for yell to a westerly gale. End. Recorded in the Talking Book Studios of the American Printing House for the Blind, Louisville, Kentucky, November 1955. Read by Livingston Gilbert.
Here's one from '62, one of the last
Belle
ones.
Lamington by D.E. Stevenson. Copyright 1961 by Dorothy E. Petlow. Recorded in 7 records for the Library of Congress in the studios of the American Printing House for the Blind, 1962. Intended solely for the use of the blind, with the kind permission of the publishers Holt, Reinhardt, and Winston. Read by Dale Carter. This novel tells the story of a country girl who comes to live alone in London. The author's books, Anna and Her Daughters and Still Glides the Stream, are also available on Talking Records. Here is a sketch of the author. D.E. Stevenson is the author of Voices. "Yes, there they are," whispered Rhoda. She giggled mischievously and added, "Don't say a word, James. It'll be fun to see what excuses they'll make for their extraordinary behavior." This is the end of Belle Lamington by D.E. Stevenson, recorded in the Talking Book Studios of the American Printing House for the Blind, Louisville, Kentucky, January 1962. Read by Dale Carter.
Okay, that takes care of the talking book machine. And here's something else we've got lined up for a future video. This is a Meisner FM tuner from the late 40s. This is one of those models that was designed to plug into the phono input of an existing AM radio so you could have a FM reception capability. Here's the inside. Looks pretty well made. I think the way this was designed to operate is this plugged into the phono input on your radio. Of course, it needs a new plug. And then your phonograph plugged into this, and your AC for your phonograph plugged into here. And of course, this is your AC for the tuner. And that way you could have your tuner connected to the radio without losing your phonograph capability. And it looks like our dial string is missing, as well as our dial pointer. Sure, I can find a pointer off of some piece of junk somewhere, but I'm not too big on stringing dials. That's one of my least favorite things about fixing old radios.